So I'm just going to start by drawing the human figure again. We're going to talk about the important proportions of them and then really go from there. So I have this picture of this man here. I chose it because it is a straight on picture of him. He's standing in a relatively straight stance, so we can look at all the proportions and go from there. So first thing you're going to notice is something called, the first thing you're usually going to draw is called a medial line, and a medial meaning middle, medium, right in the middle of where this man is standing. So that's going to go straight up and down from basically in between the feet all the way to the tip of the head. So I'm just going to redraw it over here so that way I can get the same frame. You're always going to start with lines and shapes in general, and then going from there. So while we have that there, next thing we're going to figure out is where the basic parts of the body is. So about the middle of the body is where the pelvic bone is, or where your hip bones are, and that we can also do in a line. So this man's pelvis is pretty straight across, and it's about in the middle of that line. So I'm going to measure about in the middle. And at this point, we're just figuring it out. So we can put lines wherever we want. We can erase them and go back and forth if we really want to. All right. So from there, we're going to figure out where his shoulders are too. And again, that can also be done with a line. This man has his shoulders at sort of an angle. So, and again, I'm going to draw right on top of this photo so that way you can see it a little better. If I notice from this hip point to his head point, this line is a little bit more than halfway through. The website you go to is Pexels, Pexels, Pexels. No problem. And I'll put it in the chat too in case you guys forget. Pexels. Oh, my caps was on. All right, so I will notice that it's about 3/4 of the way up. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that line, and I'm going to try to mimic the line of his shoulders. We can also do this with the feet too if we want, from one heel to the other. Pretty much a straight line. And I'm almost going a 1-for-1 comparison right now, so I can just kind of drag that over. All right. Now from there, we're going to look at our, we're going to start focusing on the head, because if we get the head right, then we can get everything else right. The head, if I were to draw right on this drawing here, or this picture, and I were to cut out, if I were to cut out this, I would have 1, and I could start moving this down. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the average human height is between 7 and 8 heads high. So I'm actually going to start that on the other side here, and I'm going to pay attention to this space, to this space in between the chin and that shoulder bar, or that shoulder line. That's the head, ends about right there. And then I'm going to pay attention to the height of the head. That's about right there. And then what I can do is finish drawing that oval. And if I really wanted to, I could check over here too, just to make sure. Cut that out. So this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Awesome. So that's about the same. Now we are going to go from there. We're going to start filling in the rest of the body. So we again want to work from a general shape to a specific shape. So I'm going to start breaking this body down into shapes. Besides the head, the biggest shape of the body is the torso. So that's from your shoulders to your hip bones. And it depends on if it's a man or a woman, the shape that it is. Normally you want to work in rectangles or triangles. Men typically have an inverted triangle shape, and their legs come out here and their arms. Women generally have an hourglass shape, which are two triangles together. But again, every body is different. So this may or may not apply to the figure that you are drawing. And this man, he does have sort of an inverted triangle right here. So I may actually just go ahead and draw that in there. But obviously it's not going to be that exaggerated. So then I can go ahead and I can start figuring out the pelvis too. And the pelvis is usually, it actually kind of looks like underwear right now, but triangles and rectangles. And I want you to notice that this man's hips are narrower than his shoulders. So they're smaller than the shoulders. And if you look, in men, they're going to have a gap in between where their hand... Oh, hold on, McKenna's coming in. They're going to have a gap usually between where their hand hangs and their hips are. Because women have larger hips, sometimes their hands touch their hips, and that's just something naturally that happens. So men have broader shoulders, women have narrower shoulders typically, and men have narrower hips and women have larger hips, and that's a typical thing. So if these are his shoulders out here, I'm going to make his hips, they're not going to be quite as wide, so I can just draw some tick marks in there. All right. So again, we're just kind of mapping out what we see, just the basic shapes, and then we're going to go to specifics. So while we're doing this, I'm going to keep referring back to this head size. So we know that one head height will get us to that chin. We know the second head height will get us to the breast line. We know the third head height will get us about to that belly button. The fourth head height will get us to the top of that pelvic bone. And then let's see, if we go from the bottom, here's the bottom of our heads. Here's about the ankles, about the knees, and then we can go from there and really measure it out. What we can also do is we can take the heads and we can put the heads next to each other. So if this is how wide the head is, I could move that over to see how wide the shoulders are. So if this is how wide his head is, and I were to move that over, then I could see that his shoulder comes out about 3/4 of the way from his head width. And we can try it again over here. So this is head width. Again, it's about 3/4 of that width. So head width, and then we can match it up to about 3/4. Which we were right, it's about 3/4 right there. All right, and that's about the same width, so we got that. From there, we're gonna start working on laying in the foundations for the legs and the arms, and the best way to do that are with ovals. That's the best way that I can do it. And sometimes you'll see two artists drawing in the joints, which are usually just circles. So if I were to practice on this drawing just to get a feel of where that joint is, I can then transfer it over to my other drawing. And then I can start laying in where the arms are, and if I look, we're 1, 2, 3 heads down. That bottom of that third head kind of goes to his elbow. So I know that that is where my arm has to stop. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the middle part of my arm is about right there. And I know because his shoulders are tilted like this, I know that everything else is going to be tilted a little. So I will work on my right side now, and I know that this arm is going to be a little further up, so it won't end exactly in the same spot. And again, we can do that with the bottom part of the arm. Again, we're just doing general to specific, so generally that's where it ends. Right at the hip line is where those wrists end. And then we can put some shapes for the hands. Diamonds are really good shapes for that, just to get a space, or just to get that laid down where we need it. All right, now on to the legs, and we know that 1, 2, and that third, the bottom of that third lines up with his knees. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that on my drawing. So 1, 2, 3, it's gonna line up right there. And he's standing up fairly straight, so I'm just gonna go ahead and draw that there. All right, and now we have a joint right here, which is our knee. So we're gonna put that in there. It's gonna overlap a little bit because they interlock together. They don't sit right next to each other. They kind of like work all together. They're held all together with muscles and stuff. And then I know that the ankles end about at that point, or begin about at that point. So I'll go ahead and draw those ovals in. And if you notice, the top part of the leg, the thigh, holds up a lot of our weight. There's a lot of important structures in there to keep us held up. So it's going to be larger than our calf. All right, and then feet. I like to draw right on top of the feet, or pretend like I'm drawing if I'm looking at something, just to get a feel of how that would look, or how that would feel to draw it. And then I kind of copy it over from there. All right. Now I'm going to look overall at my kind of map that I made here for my person. Does it feel right? Does it look right? Looking at it right now, and it's kind of hard to tell because, well, he's got baggy pants on, he's got a baggy shirt on, so it's kind of hard to tell where his body is. Looking at my drawing right now, the bottom part of his legs seem very short to me. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take my eraser and I'm going to lightly kind of erase what I had. I may leave the feet a little more. And then I'm going to redraw this. I'm going to draw his pelvic bone up a little more. And then I'm going to bring his legs down and maybe his knees. Oops. Knees about right there. Knees about right there. And then I'm going to fix my drawing right now before I get too far into it. Because once I get everything drawn in and shaded, I'm not really going to want to come back and refix it. So I'm going to fix it now so that way there's less fixing I have to do later. All right, that looks a lot better to me. But now looking at it, I think his arm is a little too long. His arms are a little too long. So I'm going to erase that. Bring that up just a little bit. Oops. And then we'll go ahead and draw those hands in there. And I can erase what I don't like. Oops. All right, if anybody can hear me, go ahead and give me a raised hand or a yep or a yep if you guys are doing good. Awesome. All right, so now we're going to go in and we're going to start adding in all those details, all the specifics. So I may erase some of what I've got. All right, now we're gonna go in with the specifics. What I like to do is grab my eraser, and I like to erase a lot of what I did to where I can see a faint outline of everything. And then I go in with my pencil and I add in all the final, all the important details. So this is when I'm going to start going in with my pencil. I'm going to hold it out and I'm going to figure out those angles. And if you're drawing from a picture to the paper next to it, you can literally put the pencil right on the paper, hold that angle, and then just slide it over and put it on your paper that you're drawing. If you are drawing something from life, you're going to need to go from here down to your paper. It's really important that you lock your elbow when you do that so things don't change, and hold your hand as steady as possible. You may have to check a couple times, and that's fine. So for me, because I'm on my iPad, it's right here, I'm just going to be using my Apple Pencil just to measure that angle and then transferring that over to my drawing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically start in one spot and I'm going to move around. And because he's fairly symmetrical right now, if I do something on the left side, I'm going to do it on the right side too. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start measuring out these angles. I'm probably going to start with the neck because that's something we didn't really draw to begin with. And then I'm going to go in and work on this face. And this is when I can also start adding in the shapes of his hair. I'm not going to do too much with the face because I'm going to do that next and show you guys how to do faces. So I might just put his nose in there and maybe his lips, maybe his ears. Alright, I'm going to go around, keep going around. And while I'm looking at these angles, I'm also looking at the angles in relation to each other. So if I were to look at the angle from, let's see, what's a good spot? The angle of the bottom of his shirt compared to his hands. I can see that it basically almost lines up with that crook where his thumb meets the rest of his hands. So I'm gonna check here, the line of his shirt, does that line up with where the crook of my drawing's thumb is? And yes, so that way I know that the shirt angle in relation to the angle of the inside of the hand, that matches up, so that tells me I'm going in the right direction. All right, now for the sake of time, I'm just gonna go ahead and move to the face portion, the portrait portion, face. So yesterday, this is what we did. We worked on finding those proportions together. So we're gonna try this again. Okay, so first we're gonna start with our general overall shape of the face. And for the most part, that is usually an oval, a circle. This lady, she's got a very round face, kind of oval, round. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to quickly draw that oval or that round face. So general oval shape, and then we're going to split it down. So just like our human body, we have a very symmetrical. All right, so we're going to have this medial line again, medium, middle, medial, right in the middle. So if this is the top of our head, this is the bottom of our head, this would be the middle line. So split right in between our nose. Nose split in two, splits our eyes and our mouth. There's also another middle line, medial line, and that's right in the middle of the head. And that's going to go through both of the pupils. Oops, that one was a little crooked. All right, so that's right in the middle of the head. Yes, your eyes are right in the middle of your head. That's not in the middle. Let's try it again. Your eyes are right in the middle of your head. Sometimes with our hair, it looks like that our eyes are up higher than they are. But this is my first tip for you to draw an like a real looking face, is the eyes are directly in the middle. So now from there, we're gonna start mapping out the rest of the face. If from the eyes, from this line here, down to the chin line, our face is split into 3 sections. For the most part, they're even. Sometimes people, like this lady, has a lower nose. But if I were to split this evenly into 3 sections, that would give me a general idea of where that nose is, where that mouth is. I'm going to go ahead and split that just to give us a marking of where everything is. And then we're going to go in and we're going to start figuring out all the rest of this stuff. So one thing that I like to do is I like to measure the width of the head compared to the height of the head. So if I were to take and measure from one side to the other, like this, I know that one width of the head, why is this not closing? Let's try this again. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I know this is the width of my head. If I were to rotate that, I could then see how the width of my head compares to the height of my head. So I have 1 and about 3/4 height as opposed to the width. So if I were to bring this over here, and we're going to try to do a 1-for-1. So if this is the width of my head, I can rotate it. And again, I got 1 and about 3/4. So that fits. So then what I can do is I can take let's do this. We can also do things like from the eye to the bottom, so half of our face, we can then measure that to like the width of the eyes. So from one outside of the eye to the outside of the eye, that is the same as the height from the eye line to the chin. So let's take this over here. Okay, so we know that from the eye line to the chin, that's there. And then if I were to take it, rotate it, that's going to tell me where my eyes are because it's going to be mostly centered in the face. So I'm actually going to leave that there because we already have those lines there. And then we can go and we can start going into those specific shapes. So the width of one eye is the same as the width in between those eyes. So I know that if there's enough for 3 eyes to go across, then I can go ahead and split this into thirds, really. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to eyeball the eyeballs. Let's see what we can do. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. We can also double check it. So I can go ahead and use my pencil, or I can just draw. You can even cut out a piece of paper. You could really, if you wanted to, use a ruler, although I try to stay away from rulers because when I see numbers, they kind of trip me up. So perfect. That's almost perfect, and that'll work. All right. Okay, now from there, we can, I kind of start working with the eyeballs and then working out. after I get everything basically mapped out. So I'm going to zoom in. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And we're going to work on one eye. And because it's symmetrical, we're going to do what we do to one eye, we're going to do the reverse to the other eye because they're mirrored. So generally people, when they try to draw eyes, they try to draw this shape. They try to draw this shape. And these are a basic shape, but it's not quite right. So instead, I like to trace over pictures to train my brain how to do this. So I go over and I trace the shape that's there. And if you notice, the inside part of the eyes are almost always more narrow and more pointed, and the outside part of the eyes are a little more rounded. So instead of like this almond shape that we have here, it's a little more of a teardrop shape almost. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing those shapes over on the face. So if I know that that's my pupil, this is going to come up about this far above the line. And actually the tear ducts fall below that line. All right, so I got one there. Let me go ahead and draw the other side now. And for the most part, people have pretty much the same shape eye on each side. Sometimes you may have somebody who has a different shaped eye, or there may be something wrong with their eyelid. One of my eyelids droop, so especially when I get tired, one eyelid will be further down than the other, but this lady has a very symmetrical face, and her eyes are pretty much the same on both sides. Once I go there, we can start putting in the iris, which is the colorful part of your eye. So if you have brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes. So this lady, she's looking directly at us. This is a trick that a lot of artists use, especially in the Renaissance time. Have you ever looked at a painting and the eyes follow you when you go throughout the room or you're moving away from them? If you've ever had that happen, it's because the eyes are looking directly at you. They're right in the center.
Yes.
If I wanted to, I could put the eyes up here as though she was looking up. I could have them looking down. I could really do whatever I wanted. But right now, my goal is to draw this lady, and right now, she's looking directly at us. Something that I want you to notice is where the iris ends compared to the eyelid. Most people, when their eyes are at a neutral state, when they're just kind of existing, at least one part of the iris is going to be covered. So you're not going to see a full circle like this. The only time you would see a full circle like that for the iris would be as if they're shocked, if they're scared, if they're angry. My mom's really good at it. When she would get really upset with me, her eyes would go crazy wide and her eyebrows would fly up and she'd be like, Kaylee Sue, like, I'm sure you all have experienced that at some point. But from there, the pupil is pretty much even in there. Your pupil's pretty wide to begin with. And actually, I think I drew her eyelid a little too open. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Because when I look at the picture, her pupil is very large. And it also is covered by that eyelid. So right now I might just fill that in just to keep me on track. From there, I do the eyelid. There's many different eyelids. It all depends on where your ancestors are from. If you're from Asia, typically you have, or if your ancestors are from Asia, typically you have what's called a hooded eyelid, so you don't really see it. So if this lady was Asian, I probably wouldn't be seeing her eyelid. That would all be gone. However, she's probably Dutch or German, and you're going to see that eyelid, and it follows basically the same shape as that eyelid, except at the very end it gets closer to that eyelid, or closer to the, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw that how I see it. All right. I also like to draw a couple lines to show me just that I'm not looking at a flat surface. Ideally, if you can do the least amount of lines that you can, that would be awesome, because you don't always need to put a lot of detail into drawings for them to be successful. In fact, sometimes if you put too many details into your drawing, it can become overwhelming and really hard for the viewer to look at. So from there, we can work on the nose. I kind of go down to the nose and then the mouth, and I go back up to the eyebrows. So our nose, if I were to draw a straight line from the nostril and straight up, you would see that this inside part of this tear duct and the edge of our eyebrows all line up with that. So I already have an eye here, so if I really wanted to, I could draw that line down. Well, look, that's where the edge of the nose goes, and that's on the other side. If we do one thing on one side, we do it on the other to try and keep it symmetrical. And again, people may not have a symmetrical face, and that's fine. You'll notice that when you draw lips, and if people are talking or smiling, a lot of times one side of that lip, one side of their smile is higher than the other. But that's what makes us human, is that we're all slightly different. So then you can start adding in kind of like parenthesis shapes. And you'll notice that this lady, she's got kind of like a open L kind of shape to her nose. So it's not really a parenthesis, but kind of the same idea. So it goes down and in, down and in. Typically men, or older women or men, their nostrils you'll see come in like this, because there's a very deep shadow there. But younger people, you don't see that very much because their nose is still very full of collagen and cartilage, and it's a nice full nose. Then we can also work on the inside of the nose. A lot of artists start with a ball here. To me, that always throws me off, and it always makes drawings end up looking like a clown, like with a nose. But if it floats your boat and that's how you can see a nose, that's totally fine. For me, I just look at the lines that are there. And again, our nose is pretty even, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that. And I'm also going to pay attention to where the nostrils end as opposed to where that septum ends. So as much as I love my drawing right here, I think I'm going to redraw the bottom part of that nose because it goes further down. And I don't think I drew it further down enough. There, that's better. I'm going to erase this part so it doesn't distract me. And I don't really need this much anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and erase that. All right. And now I can do the nostrils. So a lot of people, their first idea is to draw circles like this and fill them in. That would be fine if you have a nose that's turned up like a pig, which is fine. There's people with noses like that. But our girl that we're drawing right now does not have a nose like that. So most of the time what I do is I just kind of I connect these two shapes that we made, and I just kind of thicken my line there to imply that there is a nostril there. Sometimes I may add lines just right here just to show, okay, that's a nose. All right, now we're gonna go on to the lips. This line that we drew is the middle line of that lip. So let me erase this so we can see our lips a little better. Okay, just like noses, just like eyes, there's a whole bunch of different shapes of lips and eyes. Some people have very full lips, some people have no lips at all. Typically, your top lip is going to stick out further than your bottom lip. And that's why our top lip almost always is darker, because it's in shadow, it's further out. So if I were to turn to the side, you would be able to see that my lip goes out further than my bottom lip. I heard that was an evolutionary thing, although I don't think there's proof to it, that it's supposed to be like if it were raining, it would like come and like drip off your lip so you wouldn't drown. I don't know the validity of that, so don't quote me, but that's how I always remember that the lip comes out. So it's like a roof for your mouth. All right, so the first thing I do is I start right in the middle, because again, we're practically symmetrical. Most of the time we're symmetrical. So there's a little V usually for that top lip. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna kind of mimic that letter V that I saw, that I practiced on my drawing or my picture. And then I'm gonna start moving these lines out. I'm gonna zoom in here so you can see a little better. What this line does, it is actually goes down and then comes back up a little bit. So same on the other side, it goes down and comes back up. And you are the artist, you can exaggerate this if you would like. I exaggerate it, especially if I'm drawing women, because that's a very feminine line there. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna draw it over here, down. Oh, and I didn't tell you the best part. We have a key right here to figure out where the end of our mouth goes. So if I were to draw a line from the end of our mouth straight up, you will see that it practically lines up right with the inside of that iris if we were looking forward. So I'm gonna draw a line straight down, just like that. So unless they have, like their eyes are crooked or they're looking off in another way, this is a great way to gauge how wide that mouth should be. Again, we're humans, so there are differences. Some people have narrower mouths, some people have wider mouths. And that's what makes drawing really fun, is because you can also control that. You are the artist, you can make these decisions. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to finish drawing that. Once I'm done with that, then I start working on the upper lip. And just like we did with the middle part of the mouth, I always start with this V usually in the middle. So a lot of people, their first instinct may be to draw this kind of a shape or a U, which is fine. Some people have lips like that, but I prefer to draw kind of like when you're a kid and you draw those seagulls. I mean, not really just kid, I still do that. Flying, it's kind of that shape. So I start with that and I look at how far up that lip is from the rest. And then I draw the outside line. So instead of going like this, we want to try and curve it to make it look fuller, if your person has full lips. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and draw that. Something to pay attention to is it doesn't go all the way to the end of the lip. And then our bottom lip, most of the time, I may just add a little line to show that there's a shadow there. If you would like to, you can draw the rest of the line, and usually that it's not as wide as your top lip. So this is actually too thick of a lip for the girl that I'm drawing, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that in. All right, and then from there, we would draw the eyebrows, paying attention where the eyebrows are compared to the eye. And then we would go around and focus on the shapes around the face. Same thing that we did with the body. We would go through with our pencil and measure that out. But yeah, for the sake of time, I'm going to stop it there.